Harvey Ford, panelists. Oops. And people know me. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Please mute yourself if you're not a member of the panel or if you're me. And I'm just grateful to have you all here. This is just something that I was very interested in, and I'm not sure why. It started from the whole white fragility kind of, and then we, in one group, let's see, the Solums and Harry and who else is in that group? Patsy. All seem to kind of come from a similar spot on the map. And I just also sensed this huge sense of like, well, but there was no one. I mean, it's hard to be called a racist when there's not, when the only race is white. And that's kind of the norm, which we have learned, or that's kind of the non-whatever. So I just am interested in what it was like for them growing up. This is similar to our white fragility groups. We are here to listen to their stories. We're not here to judge. We're not here to, you know, kind of break out any great truths, but just hearing from people's stories, I think has been incredibly rich. I have asked each panelist, and I'll name them, to just go ahead and introduce themselves and just say briefly describe where you grew up, your family, and then if you went away, what did you go away for? What did you come back to? That's another kind of common denominator that I'm interested in. They've all seen, most of them have seen the questions because I'm not trying to trip anybody up. I'm just trying to kind of hear their stories. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with, I'm just gonna do this randomly. Harry Reed, why don't you start? Who you are and kind of, where do you hail from?
I'm Harry Reed, and I was born and raised in the Coeur d'Alene area. Micah Flats actually was our home, and my mom and dad farmed. Dad farmed, plus he worked and retired from Potlatch Mill in Coeur d'Alene after 28 years. And I went in the military when I was 19 and spent, I was just gonna do 4 years, and I ended up with 20 years and 4 children and a wife. So it was a great run.
Not necessarily in that order?
Yeah, no, not necessarily.
Okay.
And then what? Where are you, wife?
And you graduated from?
Actually, I went to school. I didn't graduate. I didn't graduate in 1962 like I should have, but years later in the military, I went back to school, got my diploma, and actually did a few semesters of college at the University of Arizona.
Oh,
So,
well, that's cool. Okay,
while I was in there.
okay, well, thank you. Okay, but did you do school in the Coeur d'Alene area, in the Coeur d'Alene schools?
Yes, it was the Coeur d'Alene High.
Thank you. And where was it located?
It was on, well, it's on 15th Street, which is now, I don't know, middle school, I think.
Yep, so that's Lakes Middle School in case
Lakes
you're
Middle.
interested.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Roberta, how about you?
I'm Roberta Lamana, and I was born and raised in Priest River. My dad was also born and raised there, and that's why we were there. He, after high school, he went to Gonzaga U and then came back to Priest River and began a long education involvement. He was a principal teacher, principal superintendent, et cetera, et cetera. My mother was from Chicago, and very multicultural neighborhood where she grew up. And I think that influenced us a lot along the way. When I was growing up in Priest River, it was a heavily Italian population. In fact, there was outside of town, about a mile or so, was, they called it the Italian settlement. And they had their own school and their own church, and they all spoke Italian. My dad went to that school until he was in 6th grade. So anyway, I was very heavily influenced by Italians in my growing up years. There are so many people that did not speak English. So anyway, that's just a little bit about me.
Did you grow up speaking Italian?
You know, we didn't.
Talk about your neighbor.
Rosemary, that's a 1.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was saying encouragement, though. It's a beautiful story that she won't tell, but that's okay.
Maybe she'll tell it at another time.
Yes, another time.
Oh, when will we begin? Oh, no.
You get to 3 and then I'm going to boot you.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, all right, good. Thank you. Okay, so ask Roberta a story. She's at another time maybe. Okay, Marilyn.
All right. My name is Marilyn Reasoner Griffin White. I'm a widow. My dad moved the family to Burke, Idaho to work in the Star Mines in 1942. I was 7. I went to school in Burke for 7 years, and then they moved the school to Wallace, Idaho. So I graduated from Wallace High School salutatorian in 1952, and I married Dean Griffin in 1953, and we moved to Portland, Oregon, so we could be near his family. He had come to Burke to be with his uncle. He was going to work there, but it didn't work out.
Over there.
And so we moved, and we lived in Portland and the Vancouver, Washington area then for 25 years, basically. And my 3 boys were born in Vancouver, Washington. Kelly was born in Tacoma. That was 1959, 1960, and 1963. My youngest son, Kelly, died in 2014. And both of my parents are deceased. And so are the parents of both of my husbands. So I am now back in Wallace and have been here since 1978. I came back to be with my birth family, mother, and I have 4 sisters, but Lois died last year. So now there are 3 of us, and we get together often. They live in the area, Coeur d'Alene and Osborne. So I'm a native, definitely. Burke, Idaho was where I really grew up. Racism was not in our vocabulary.
Okay, so my question is where is Burke in relation to Wallace?
About 7 miles down the road. When I went to school, we had a bus that went from Burke to Wallace.
Okay.
Also, we had Galeri's bus. Solon, you know Galeri's bus.
Yes, oh yes.
I know
Yeah.
Janet lives up in Burke, and Howard is in Pinehurst in the nursing home, and we keep in touch all the time.
Oh, I love that.
We do know people around the area here.
I would hope so.
But yes, when I was growing up in Wallace High School, Galeri's bus was my transportation because my dad did not let me drive. I was too young, and it cost money to do gas. And
what did your father do? I missed what your father did.
Pardon?
What did your father do for a living?
Didn't hear you.
What did your father do for a living?
Okay, he was a miner. He worked at Star Mine for 20 years. We came in 42. He died in 62. And mother was 10 years younger, but she stayed in Burke. She did not like Burke when we moved there. She wasn't going to stay. But Dad said, this is where our living is. He was a logger before that, and logging was seasonal.
Oh.
And he said, this is dry. I give a paycheck every 2 weeks. This is where we're living.
Yeah.
So we did.
That's good. Thank you. Okay, Bill Solom.
Yes, I'm Bill Solom. I'm also from the Silver Valley. I was born in Wallace. We had a dairy 2 miles outside of Wallace in the Burke Canyon. I had 4 sisters and 1 brother. I'm the youngest. And I was really isolated in because my father worked 7 days a week, so we didn't take vacations. And my mother didn't drive, so I spent most of my time in the canyon. And I graduated from Wallace High School and then the University of Idaho in 1970. And then I had a career in the military, in the Army. So I did get to see the world that way. And then I returned back to here, lived in Rathdrum and now Coeur d'Alene.
Very good. All right, thank you. Kathy.
I'm Kathy Solom. My maiden name is Thomas. In full disclosure, for white fragility, I'm probably 100% European, English, both sides of the family. So they came over from England, and both sides were miners. My dad actually was a pipe fitter for the mines. He wasn't an underground miner. Mother is a homemaker. I have an older brother. I graduated from Kellogg High School and University of Idaho. Got married after college graduation to a man from Iowa. And after we had traveled for about 3 years with different jobs, one was in LA, one was in, it wasn't different jobs, it was one company, but my husband was a field engineer. And so we were in LA, Salt Lake City, and Houston. And our next stop, this is going to be telling, our next stop was Birmingham, Alabama. And we quit and moved back to North Idaho.
Go.
Because it was 1975. And we chose, because we'd been married 3 years and weren't sure about when to start a family and raising children in the South, when we had no clue, we chose to go home. Chose my home, and my husband worked for Bunker Hill.
Okay, and Bunker
as an
Hill
engineer.
is a mine.
It is.
Is it? Okay.
It was the mine. It was a big one. And then we lived out in the country in the Rose Lake area.
Oh.
So my children were raised in the country. And they were like Bill, they were isolated, had no, just when they got in school, well, church when they're little kids and then school. But I had no contact with any other race. Well, we had an Italian segment in Kellogg, but you know, I never associated them as anything but people who were raised with me. And if anything, there was classism.
Okay.
You knew your place.
I think that's going to be an interesting point. Thank you. Patsy.
I'm Patsy Sorensen, and I grew up in the Bitterroot Valley. And the Bitterroot is the valley south of Missoula between the Bitterroot Mountains and the Sapphire Mountains, which are the lower mountains. Bitterroots are quite high and majestic. And the Bitterroot's made up of small towns all along the way. The towns are still not very big at all, but I spent time in both Corvallis and Hamilton, which are just 13 miles apart. But I grew up pretty rural, and actually in my very young days, the places we lived did not have electricity nor water, nor plumbing. So, and I started first grade in a one-room schoolhouse, and I was the only first grader. In that same year, we moved to Hamilton, and I spent a few months in a Hamilton grade school. And then we moved to Corvallis, where I finished first grade. But my dad, we lived on a dairy farm. And, you know, it wasn't years. I mean, it was our farm. We lived there for 8 years. And not until I was older did I realize it wasn't our farm. My dad ran the dairy and did the farming for a man that owned it. He was actually the mayor of Hamilton, and I think that was his retirement. So when he chose to retire, he sold the farm, and so we had to find another place to live. So I was the oldest of 5, and my sister was 3 years younger, and then our brother, our first brother was 9 years younger than me. And then my next brother was a couple of years after that, and my youngest brother was 12 years younger than I. So when I finished high school and went to St. Patrick's School of Nursing, he started first grade. So I graduated from Hamilton High School. I went there for 2 years, which was a real shock because, you know, all Corvallis were rural kids. And of course there were town kids in Hamilton, and that was so different. I was the outsider, but anyway, I went to St. Patrick's and spent 3 years there. And after graduation, married my husband, who was from Hamilton, graduated in the same class as I, and we lived in Missoula for several years. And had 3 children, and then had the opportunity to move to Coeur d'Alene. So I went from one very white setting to another. There were some African Americans in Missoula, few. In fact, I had a classmate in nursing that was from Spokane, a very nice gal, very quiet, stayed to herself, but I was quiet too, so I didn't ever get to know her very well. So that's kind of my history.
Well, that's interesting that a Black person would go from Spokane, would go to Montana for nursing school.
We had 2. Actually, you know, St. Patrick's was a Providence hospital. Sacred Heart was a Providence hospital. So, you know, that connection we had, actually, we had another senior gal that finished her, was with us at our psych setting in Warm Springs, that did that from Sacred Heart School just because we were affiliated somehow. So it just kind of all worked out that way.
Oh, okay. Charlie.
Hello there. So I'm Charlie Ford. I was born and raised in Coeur d'Alene, former neighbor of Patsy's Kitty Corner, 8th Street for a long time.
Yep.
So I graduated from high school here, which is second generation. My father graduated from Coeur d'Alene High in 1948. And went to University of Idaho, and then went in the service and was all around for about 20-some years. I only went in for 4 years to pay back my ROTC commitment, and I missed my objective I ended up staying at 24, so it seemed to work out.
I think it's interesting that 3 for 3, you guys are all career military.
Yeah.
Just
that wasn't the plan. That was the funny part.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, keep going.
No, so I was raised here. Most of the interaction with Blacks was at NIC, watching them on basketball team, because they'd bring players in, brought a lot of players in from Chicago and different places, Michigan and place. But there wasn't, because Coeur d'Alene actually had a sundown that said that you, if you were not Caucasian, you had to be out of town by dark when the sundown went.
And that stood for the athletes too, I guess.
Well, they were able to stay. I don't know what I don't know how that one worked around it, but I mean, it was appealed back in '63 or '64 when Civil Rights Act was passed.
Yeah.
And I did have a little exposure to between 1962, I went all the way to Dothan, Alabama with my grandparents. And that was a real eye opener because of something's happening here. Okay, sorry. Because that's when they still had black only entrances.
Down there, but not here.
That was in Dothan, Alabama.
Okay.
Headland, Montgomery. I actually had one of my relatives was actually a sharecropper for one of the other relatives because he lost his farm.
Yeah.
So sharecroppers were both multiracial. So
yeah. Thank you.
So that's
okay.
me.
All right, what does your dad do for a living? I missed that.
Oh, my dad had a TV and appliance business for most of the time I was growing up. Then he went into other stuff when I went in service. So
very cool. Okay, Gail, your shot.
Okay, well, I was born in Kellogg, Idaho. My dad was born in Michigan, and they're Finnish. His parents came from Finland to the mining area in Michigan, northern Michigan. And then, so all of the kids were, on my dad's side, the family were born in Michigan, Upland. And they came out to Butte, Montana, and in the early 1900s. And my grandfather worked in the mines. As one of the things that the Finns were hired for in the mines was that they're precise craftsmen, and so they were often hired to do timbering. And miners who they liked that, they wanted to go into those tunnels where the Finns had done the timbering because they knew it was done right. So I didn't inherit that, doing it right. Then they moved to Mullen, and one of the little boys, Willie, drowned in the creek there in Mullen. And so after that, shortly, and my grandfather was working in the morning mine in Mullen. And so then they went back to Butte for a bit, and that's when the Spanish flu epidemic hit. And one of the other little boys and my dad's brothers died from the Spanish flu epidemic. So they came back to Mullen, and about that time, my grandfather started to get like the miner's con. And so he decided that he better switch to farming. So they moved up on the North Fork of the Coeur d'Alene River. And what we find is that at that point in time, that area, the Coeur d'Alene River, was predominantly Finnish, or people who were from Finland. And so the main language that was spoken was Finnish, of which I never really learned, only a few cuss words. So it ended up my dad was given a piece of property in an old cabin about 2 miles up from Minaville. And so that's where I grew up. My mom was born and raised in Prosser, Washington. And her family, or she married, or I should say, the family then came over, or my grandmother's family, I should say, on my mom's side, my mom's mother came to Hayden Lake and back the farm. It's at the location of Lancaster and Rimrock. And the house is still the original house that my grandparents had built on my mom's side. My mom graduated. There were 5 kids in that family, and every one of them graduated from Coeur d'Alene High School. And my grandfather on the Burmester side was German. And so he was there were issues that during the war and that he made sure that they kept a low profile because of the Nazi efforts and all of that. So anyway, my mom met my dad mining up in Murray area and up at Jack Waite. And so, and ultimately they moved down on the river, like I said, and that's where I grew up.
Where's Murray?
I
don't know. Murray, Jack Waite? I don't know what that is.
Jack Wade is north of Murray. In fact, no longer can you get up there, but it's kind of, in fact, that one of the mining tunnels goes from Idaho into Montana. And so it was a heavily high producing mine, and it was a regular community and stuff up there at that time. I mean, it's quite a fascinating history.
Okay.
And kind of the upshot, my dad died from a mining accident in 1953 when I was like 9 years old.
Oh.
And we had the farm, so my mom was a single parent, and I have an older brother that he's 7 years older than I am. We stayed on the farm all the time. I graduated from Kellogg High School and went first to Eastern and then to the University of Idaho. And after my getting my undergrad work there, I joined the Peace Corps and served in Jamaica in the central part of the island. So I was the only white person in the community. After leaving the Peace Corps, I came back to Washington, D.C. because I could not come back to Idaho at that point. It was such culture shock. And so kind of that's some of the foundation to my own, excuse me. And came back to Idaho after I retired from working in the state for the state of Washington. Also had gone to school at the University of Arizona. So that's kind of the gist of it.
Okay, so my next question, I kind of want to fold them all together, and because my three questions that I want to fold together are what was communicated non-verbally, verbally and non-verbally about race in your family and in your community. I guess maybe just that. You know, what was the temperature like in your family, and then what you knew outside of your home. And I am just going to go ahead and start with Patsy, if that's all right.
I don't remember any communication in my family about race or differences, either good or bad. Just, I don't remember it ever being discussed. And it wasn't a subject when I was going to school in either communities. It was just a non-issue.
Well, then and if everybody else's answer is short like that, then I'd like to know what your first experience with a person of color was and kind of what went through your mind, if you can remember that.
Well, when I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, my great-grandmother lived in Missoula. And so rarely we would make that trip. It was 47 miles, but by the time you went and got home, it was a full day with the roads the way they were. So during the war, there was an army fort in Missoula. And I remember driving into town and going by a bus from the fort, and there were soldiers on it, and there were some black soldiers. And I don't know, I just noticed them. I was kind of curious, but I didn't have a bad reaction or anything. It was just,
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Gonna go with Kathy Solom.
The question is, my first encounter.
It was your, what were you verbally and non-verbally in your family? I'm kind of mushing them all together. Verbally, and then in the community. And then if that's kind of a short answer, then I'm interested in your first experience with a person of color.
All right, sorry.
You don't have to apologize.
Nothing in my household. There was just no discussion. It was just like, I wasn't aware of any of it. And high school was like that. Like I said, most of the problems in high school was class. The boss's kids and the miner's kids, etc. And in college, I don't remember having an instructor or classmates that were of color. And when we moved to Los Angeles, nobody in our apartment complex. But I did go to work. I worked for a small manufacturing firm that produced equipment for entomologists, and I worked in the shop. And the shop foreman was Mexican, and one of the helpers was Mexican, and one was black. We just worked on the shop floor, and they built cabinets, and I did what I was hired to do, and shop foreman guided me when I made mistakes, or one time I cut myself on the drill press, and I just took care of it because I didn't want anybody to know that I was bleeding. It was a cut on my finger, it was no big deal. But I was reprimanded because that's a big deal on the shop floor. You have to report that for workman's comp or whatever, for liability. And so Ed, this foreman, just explained it to me, and I said, oh, okay. And off we went. So nothing. That was the first and about the only time, because other jobs, I worked in Salt Lake City. There wasn't a whole lot of black population in Salt Lake City in 1974. Then we moved back home. So
there you go. Okay, Charlie.
Who? Oh,
Charlie Ford.
yes.
ours was nonverbal.
Oh.
Uh, yeah. I was 7 when there was a little playmate to come to visit her grandmother. And she was the daughter of a Hawaiian princess, came to the area because she married Grandma Daly's son. And the interaction that I had with her, she was just a playmate. They talked about color blindness, and this basically would have been my situation. Any reaction that I had was actually an after, what do I say, when I grew up. And because at the time it was like, go play, you know, the little gal, something I might have said, I don't know. But anyway, she talked to Mother, and Mother was, you know, Mother understood where she was coming from. But it was a nonverbal thing as far as we were concerned. It was just, go play, it's okay. And gave us a hug, and that was it. And as I say, it wasn't until later on in my life that the implication of the particular incident that I became aware of. And it was an empathy thing where you begin to realize you may have experienced some of the same things, but you didn't realize it. Not at the time. Where I grew up, as I said, black and white, red, blue. The only time we ever sang about it was Jesus Loved Me.
Right. Red, yellow, black, and white.
Yeah.
And so the only person of color growing up was that Polynesian girl. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. We did. Yeah. That was my first indication, you know, of it. My workplace that I had in Vancouver and Portland usually did not have racial people. We were all white.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Charlie.
In my household, my mother was actually raised in Alabama, and my father came out of the Dakotas. So they kind of had a different perspective, because my mother actually played with black children as playmates on the farm where she was raised. I think there was some comments type thing you catch that kind of made white feel superior. Mm-hmm. I mean, they make a statement like about a pretty black female, and they say, well, she's pretty for a black. Mm-hmm. And you kind of go, and so and then going off, probably the first interaction I had with blacks besides NIC was when I went to basketball camps. And you'd go there and they'd come from Washington, and they would have interaction, and it'd be, you know, it was normal, and an awful lot of involvement within the service as others have, because it's a microcosm of it.
Right. Okay, that's good. Thank you. All right, we've got to move on to Harry.
Growing up, there was no mention about blacks. My dad had 9 siblings. My mom had 3, and they were all in the Coeur d'Alene and Spokane area. So we didn't have time to be thinking about anything else. It was all about family, and it was a very close family. But the only connection I had then was in the military. And frankly, it was all good experiences. When I was in Germany, a black woman worked with me. And later, before I left, I had a recommendation for her so they could adopt a child, which to this day, we still exchange Christmas cards and that sort of thing. So it was I have nothing but a good experience as far as black and white. So.
And you didn't hear anything, I mean, in the wider community, was there a feeling, was there a
Not
mention?
growing up.
Okay, that's
No.
what I'm after. Okay, Roberta.
When I was growing up in Priest River, there were 2 families one was Japanese and one was Chinese, no blacks. And I don't remember a lot of conversation about that because their kids were all older.
Okay.
And they had the Chinese that was very stereotypical, had a Chinese restaurant in town. And the Japanese family, they had a doctor, they had a lawyer, they had nurses, just very well-educated people. So I never remember anybody talking about them.
Did they stay in the area, the kids?
They did. They lived there until they died.
Like the doctors and the
Yeah.
the kids.
My brother, who was a lawyer, his first job was with the Japanese lawyer. He brought him into his practice. The only conversations I remember were about Native Americans.
Okay.
And they would come from, there were, when we had what's called a loggers celebration, they would come, and there was always that feeling of being cautious because they were usually drunk. I mean, that was, what our image.
Right.
So that was the only thing I remember was the Native American culture.
Were like the white loggers drunk too?
Everybody.
Oh, everybody. Okay. But the kind of the thing was to be watchful of the Native Americans.
Right, of the Native Americans, yeah, from Browning, Montana.
See, I think it's more Montana than it is.
They were wild, yes.
Yeah. All right.
That's what we thought anyway. That my first experience with a black person was I was teaching in white schools in Spokane and Richland, and then I went to move to Seattle to a 98% black school and taught junior high. And Rosemary said, "How did you do that? Wasn't that hard?" And I don't remember it being hard. It was just what you did. And it was a real opening to black culture and the kids, through the kids. And some days they'd come into the classroom and they'd be furious, slam banging in, throwing their books on their desks because somebody had said something to them on the bus about being black, some white person. And that was the hardest part, was dealing with that anger toward white people, which, was very understandable. I took them on a class outing to the waterfront one day, and there were lots of kids down there from different parts of Seattle. And as we were waiting for the bus to pick us up to go home, the white kids started throwing candy wrappers and gum wrappers and all of that at the kids. I mean, it was just such blatant racism. And the kids held their own, and the teachers didn't do a thing.
How does one hold their own?
They didn't retaliate. And the part that really shocked me was that the teachers saw it and did nothing. And so I said something to one of the teachers, and finally, you know, their bus was coming, so she just got them all on the bus and out of there. So that was really my first real experience with Black community.
Huh. Bill.
Yes. Like I said, I was pretty isolated, and race really wasn't discussed in my family. But I do recall, very clearly recall, because this is ingrained in my memory, the first time I realized something about race. This was in the 50s, and segregation was still going on. And I think I was with my parents watching a television variety show, possibly Nat King Cole. He was only on for 1 year because no corporation would sponsor him. They were afraid to sponsor him, to lose business. But my mother, that was her favorite singer, was Nat King Cole. And while we were watching that, she made a comment that stuck with me forever. So she says, you know, if he came here, he could not spend the night in town. And that sounded very strange to me, but she didn't go on and say that was wrong. It was just a fact, the way it was. So what did that tell me as a young child? It told me that Blacks were different and they weren't welcome. So at that moment, did I become racist? Because that's what I may have thought and carried with me for, you know, quite some time. I don't know. That stayed with me though, since then. And my first encounter with a Black person wasn't until I joined the military. And it was basic training, first day. Yep, Black drill sergeant. Talk about a position of power. That's got to be nothing greater than that, being a drill sergeant. And we actually, the company you had several drill sergeants. We had 3 Black drill sergeants. The senior drill sergeant was Black. We had 2 white drill sergeants and 1 Hispanic. And it didn't matter which one you had at any given day. They were all the same. And of course they were frightening, but by the end of basic training, you grew very fond of your drill sergeants, all of them. Mm-hmm. I have fond memories of them to this day.
That is fascinating. Okay, who haven't I asked? Oh, Gail. Gail, sorry, Gail. Yeah, you, please.
Yeah, you. Well, the first time I remember seeing people who are Black was when we would go to Spokane. And this is just when I was a little kid. And we'd go in on the bus or that. And so I can remember being intrigued because we didn't have any of those up in the Silver Valley. Of course, eventually finding out the reason we didn't have them in the Silver Valley was because they weren't allowed in. And that was because the Black Army was brought in. It was in the late 1800s during a mining strike and that. And so the Black Army was to break that up. And after that, because nearly unions and that were very strong in that, region. And so therefore they weren't accepted. And that's how that wall was built, so to speak. But anyway, back to being a little kid, I was curious and about the Blacks that we would see in Spokane on the street, but it wasn't until basically going to Eastern in college that I had colleagues, fellow students that were in classes that were Black, and still communicate with some. And the same with transferring to the University of Idaho. And like I shared earlier, going into the Peace Corps after graduating from Idaho was probably my biggest shock in some ways, because I was the minority, and that's something to experience. Mm-hmm. the Jamaican people are wonderful people, and I lived up in a bush and school area or small community, and I stayed with people, and his family was the home I lived in. So it was 100% black. So I was the only white and the only American during Vietnam. That adds a twist to it too. So,
okay, so this is what I hear, and this doesn't surprise me, but you didn't really talk about it at home. Didn't seem like a big deal in community. At least that's what you all shared. And, you know, when I realized that this was kind of a unique situation, you didn't really go to school with any of them. And yet this part of the country, this part of the world is known for its racist. And I would, and I don't, and it's interesting. We're looking specifically at blacks. And I guess in my mind, I think specific, oh, here you go. Actually, Annalie Getzman, she's a couple of years younger than I am. I have to read this because I think this is incredible. How did what you guys just talked about get to this? This is, she's probably, see, I'm 51, she's probably 47, 48. Hi, Pastor Heather. I thought I'd drop you a line and tell you a few memories I have growing up here in the 80s. I can distinctly remember Richard Butler and the Aryan Nations with their compound off Rimrock Road in Hayden. At the elementary school I attended, there were 3 black people. They lived close to my house. Lamar had a crush on me and frequently came over. He and I attended each other's birthdays. In 1986, his family was run out of town by the Aryans. They terrorized his family, drove trucks onto their front yard, revved engines, threw rocks at them, etc. It was horrible. Because of the abuse his family sustained, they moved away. My neighbor was an adopted black girl who would babysit my sister and I. We walked downtown once and were followed, harassed by skinheads in a truck. They tried to run us down in the crosswalk, causing Hope, which I think is the babysitter's name, to break down into tears. It was very scary. Her family also moved away.
Oh, God.
That same year in 1986, Father Bill Wasmuth stood up against the hate and had his garage bombed. It took many community leaders and many years to get rid of the Aryans. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Father Bill. He was quite a guy. He did lots of good for this community. And then she says, I hesitated to move back here because of the lingering mentality that continues to reside here. But my family drew me, and not everyone here is hate-filled. There's not a lot of diversity, though. Probably still work to be done to show that love can conquer hate. How is what we all heard, how does that translate into experiencing something? Yeah, that's really, how? And you guys can raise your hands and chime in. This is just for the panelists. Because, I mean, this is your native place.
you know, I guess I'll chime in there. You know, the story I've shared with you would reflect a gap in time as far as my living here, because I did not return and live here. I'm at full time until probably about 15, 16 years ago. And a part of the reason for that is because I do not respect or disrespect for people of diversity. And to me, that was painful as I watched that, even kind of growing up and like the, you know, what you're describing, those incidences continuing to, occur during the time period when I wasn't in the area. I was living either in Washington State or Montana or wherever. So I guess that to me was just a part of the reason I wouldn't live here until I fully retired and I wasn't involved, you know, professionally, and I can kind of go where I want and that kind of thing. But anyway, it was some of that was smart.
Did you think that the roots of their being able to take root here came from the 1800s and the Black Army coming?
Yes, I think so. It seems like it. And then compounded, you hit on it, Heather, I think, of compounded by the Aryan Nation and the white supremacists, and that really has exacerbated conditions.
But okay, I'm going to go to Patsy now. But yeah, Patsy.
Well, I think when I first started reading this book, I think I expressed feeling a sense of guilt because we did have the presence of the Aryan nations here. And I know I didn't, and I think the citizenry in general, except for a few that really took issue and did something about it, the rest of us remained silent. And I think that's why, you know, she went on in the next chapter in the book when she said something about to her co-worker, maybe we'll go visit Coeur d'Alene, and she didn't say specifically she was Black, but just from her response, you had to assume she was. Why would I want to go there? You know, I guess I thought, what can I do about it? You know, another thing, I have to admit, as a nurse, I actually took care of Richard Butler's wife.
Oh, wow.
But that's what you do when you know, you take care of everybody. And, you know, he was, well, of course, he had the underhand in that situation, but he didn't do anything derogatory or anything, nor did she, but I don't know, it was kind of a funny situation, but that's, when you're in healthcare, you take care of those that have a need.
Right. Charlie, did I hear you about to say something?
Well, the Black troops was the 25th Regiment, infantry regiment that was stationed at Fort George Wright in Spokane, and they were brought over during the two mining strikes, 1882, 1889, something like that, were the two times. And they also were brought in and helped with the 1910 fire.
Okay.
That's correct.
So so they were brought in not once, but twice to break a strike. And as we talked earlier, somebody mentioned the unions were strong here. And so that was a big, I mean, you went against the unions. That was significant. So.
Yeah, they also brought it, when the troops left Fort Sherman to go to the Spanish-American War, troops from Spokane came over and guarded the post until they sold off Fort Sherman.
Really? Okay. Solom's, I hear, yeah, go ahead. Kathy?
I'm sorry. When it was brought up about the Aryan nations, my first husband and I were living out in the country at that time, and we probably had one child. Not sure about the other one. Not sure about the dates, but I do remember that the Aryan Nation compound was up in Hayden in the Garwood area, and my husband's uncle lived up there. And I know that they did things like your friend wrote about, but I also know that, like, my husband's cousins were still young. The girl was in high school. You didn't go anywhere near that compound.
How come?
It didn't matter if you were, what color you were. You did not go anywhere near there. They had guard towers. And those kids knew that. You know, high school kids, they might dare each other, why don't you go up the driveway or whatever. No. So we had nothing to do with that compound.
That's interesting. So, okay, did anybody else experience similar?
I was working at St. Pius Church, and we invited the Aryan Nation to come and to tell us who they were and why they were doing what they were doing, etc. It was very interesting to see how they justified so much violence. I don't know. They were
Cain and Abel.
Oh yeah, came from Cain and Abel and all the way down and the 12 tribes and blah blah blah.
So, Roberta, so did you work with Father Bill?
No, I came right after he had left. Yeah.
Okay.
But it was still very much present, you know.
Sure.
His spirit was very much present. in the church. So it was quite an eye opener to actually hear them talk about who they were and why they were here and what they were doing. We were shocked, basically shocked, at the misinformation. And they came in their little blue shirts with their swastikas and all of that. I mean, it was frightening. It was very frightening. But it was. We tried to do something. Very slick presentation about who they were,
Yeah,
and why they were here. So.
and so did you all feel like there was anything you could do or not, or
No.
really not? Really?
Oh, we
No.
all spoke out.
Nothing. Everybody, told them wrong. You are wrong. This is not who we are. And
Go to the library and get educated.
Yeah, go get educated. But anyway, it was interesting conversation.
Some young ones.
Harry, how about you? You have any? What was your experience, if any?
Well, I knew that they existed, and of course, I didn't get out of the military till 1983.
Okay.
But and the only thing that I remember was there were some brave people, some attorneys that actually got involved and helped get them out. And I wouldn't want to mention them, but I knew them very well, and I applauded them for what they did. So other than that, that's no personal contact with them.
Well, yeah, and just anyone else of the panel have any comments?
Well, that's how the human rights
Yeah.
panel or the
Task force.
Institute.
Institute was formed by that group that finally got rid of the Aryan Nations, and the Southern Poverty Association, their attorney came and helped with the lawsuit that finally was able to get rid of them, to cause them to financially lose their compound.
Yeah, so it wasn't because of the awful things they did. It was because of, it's like Al Capone, similar to Al Capone.
Well, yeah.
Tax evasion, stuff like that.
Something they finally did that allowed the law to actually prove them wrong, to make them lose. Yeah.
Actually, what they did was they shot at a woman and her son who were driving by the compound.
Yeah.
And that really started.
Yeah. Their car backfired. Yeah.
Legal piece. Yeah.
I do have to say that there was somebody that I asked to be on this panel, and she's a couple years older than I am. And she said, Heather, I really don't have anything to offer. She said, what we would do is she and her friends they were in high school, and they'd jump in somebody's pickup truck and go and throw rocks at the compound.
That's probably what most.
Well, yeah, I just,
They didn't get shot.
Well, I know. And now I hear that they have like guard towers and they were taking shots at people.
Yep.
Does anybody that came to did you all have questions or experience? I just think this is, it sounds to me like because it was fear. First there was anger because they tried to take away our jobs from the mines. So there was a little bit of that. There was fear and there was anger. And then it sounds to me like when the Aryans came in, it was just, there wasn't, what do you do? I mean, you would have to rally everybody in the community almost. Is that kind of what it felt like? Is that, I don't, I'm just.
They were a very small group.
Yeah.
Really?
There weren't many. No, there weren't that many of them.
Very small.
Yeah.
They had to bring people in from California for their parades.
Oh, yeah.
Really? They'd import people in? Really?
Yeah.
Well, they had connections all over the United States, actually.
Yeah.
Did that surprise anybody but me? I mean, I thought they were huge.
No, they weren't. This group here was not huge.
What do I
But
know?
they had connections all over the United States. In fact, one of them was charged with setting off a bomb someplace else, but he had connections with the group here.
Actually, Spokane. He set off a tried to set off a bomb in Spokane.
Boy, Roberta, you're in the know.
Well, was that the same man that was just executed because the backpack at the,
It was the same one.
He was executed.
yeah,
Wait a minute, the backpack at the Martin Luther
Just
King
last
March?
week or so.
yes, I think that was it. One of the big parades that was to
Yeah.
happen in Spokane.
Yeah.
He planted a backpack with a bomb, yeah.
Like that's in my
Yeah.
time since I've been here. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Oh.
Oh, yes, Rosemary.
Did you,
Rosemary.
did you say we could speak?
Yes, I did.
God, don't discuss it. Just an action thing. In that book, when it talks about Coeur d'Alene, it really bothers me that if we don't write to them and say what really happened and that we made lemonade out of lemons.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the big thing of the human rights thing, that we were going to take this in the other direction. And I think we have in many respects. I just think we still have the reputation. And I really want to write to that author and say, come on, let's get with what really happened.
That's a
Beyond
good idea.
That is a good idea. And that's good because again, it still sounds like they're just, because again, I think I've shared in all 5 of the classes, a good friend of mine, her daughter was dating a very black man and they were just holding hands walking down in downtown Coeur d'Alene, and they ran into some people who were very horrible to them. And as a result, they just picked up quick and went to Spokane, and I mean, that rules the day as far as what people know, but that's not, but I mean, we're white. What do we know? It's what the black experience is here. Matt, you're gonna have to unmute. Oh, you're already
I have a
unmuted.
question. Were the Aryan folks locals, or did they come from out of town?
Good question.
Came from other places.
other places.
Yeah.
A myriad of people.
How do they, I mean, I think one is that we're like independent, we're bootstrappers up here, you know, so you can hide in the woods and it's no big deal. That's, but other than that, why North Idaho?
I think it was Richard Butler.
But he's not from here.
But he was, he had, you know, on the internet and all of that, he had the system to recruit and to tell people about what he was doing. I think he was very influential.
Okay, so he was like one of that charismatic personality in that kind of way, whatever. Charlie, were you going to say something?
The Aryan nations recruit out of prisons.
Seriously?
Many of them, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Because of the race struggle in prison.
They've gotten out of prison?
No, they did.
No, they recruited out of prisons.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Matt, what were you going to say? You had your hand up.
I was going to ask a question. I forgot what it was. I had heard a story that at the time that the locals kind of rose up and that there was like a march downtown to get rid of them and this kind of thing. Does anyone have any experience with that?
Yeah, it was when we were here.
But it was in Hayden, and it was the Aryan nations were going to do the march.
There was one downtown Coeur d'Alene that
Oh, really?
people from Coeur d'Alene.
Oh, yeah. But the Aryan Nation did, excuse me.
They did.
They walked downtown and there was not a, excuse me for saying this, a damn thing we could do about it. That's the rights that we have in America. And so we had to, I mean, that was so intolerable that there they were. And like you said, they brought in other people.
Yeah.
And so it was, I mean, but all of that led to us, you know, trying to say, I mean, can you imagine today what it would be like, the revolt, and I mean, what we would do now? But anyway, and that's what we tried to then say, you know, start the Institute, do different things, and be moved to the other way, to the other side of what it looked like we were.
It's not much different than what's happening right now with, you know, paramilitary people with AK-24s or whatever you call them, you know, standing on the corners of Coeur d'Alene, trying to say they're going to bring peace. Well, they don't.
And no masks.
No masks. But anyway, it's kind of repeating itself a bit.
So what do we do? We couldn't, now we have got social media, so it's easier to coordinate, for lack of a better word. Carol, is that, I don't know if you were doing like the royal wave or, okay, royal wave. Mark, did.
I was a part of an interfaith group back during the time those marches were going on, and there was a couple of different opinions. One opinion among some of the members were that you go down to the parade and you turn your back. I mean, you have to be present and you have to object. And there was, I think, a subsequent year where that group as a whole decided to try to put together activities for families in another part of town, which really said, you don't go downtown. You let them be pitiful and be there by themselves, and you don't be anywhere nearby. So a couple of different ways of trying to kind of get to the same end result.
Well, and Marilyn, we haven't heard from you in a while. Do you have any recollections about this happening in Coeur d'Alene, or you were probably down in Vancouver at that time? It sounds like maybe. No,
I'm familiar with, of course, the Aryan nations, but again, it just seems to be so apart, you know, from my family and the families that I was involved in. It was like they were in a different world. They were in a different frame of mind. We really couldn't grasp it. It wasn't a part of our life. Let's put it that way.
Well, and was the road back then maybe longer from Wallace to Coeur d'Alene than it is now?
Yeah, definitely. Because I was still in. I had come back to Wallace in 1978. So, you know, we were aware of what was going on in that area regarding what they're talking about. But there again, we didn't dwell on it. It wasn't part of our life.
Interesting. Okay, Solums, you guys are having a conversation, and I want to know what you're saying.
It's okay.
Kathy and Bill?
Pardon?
You're passing notes.
About the freeway.
Talking about the freeway. Well, you know how it is. It's a lot shorter to drive from Post Falls to Coeur d'Alene than from Coeur d'Alene to Post Falls. You know, so we always expect Post Falls people to come to us, not us to them. Tell me I'm not wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
I lived on the west side. That's how Seattle people. We don't Seattle people. Puh. Okay, sorry. Kathy, how about you? You and your farm or where you're at?
You know, I'm embarrassed to admit that I don't recall a lot of it. I really don't. We stayed out on farm, much like I do here. I stay home.
I think
I didn't go. I went into church once a week. We went to
put my keychain on the door.
Well, and I think that's an important thing to also mention is that, you know, now we can hardly get away from it because there's the 24-hour news, and it's and because the road from Hayden to Wallace it was just even longer then. I mean, just those kinds of things and what has changed and what is keeping us from. My big thing is I just experienced sitting out right where I am. Abigail was here yesterday. She had to look it up, but some dude drove past on what looked like a dune buggy, because I'm that old. I don't know what it is for real, but he had a Trump flag on one side, and then he had a American flag with kind of like the 13 colonies with a Roman numerals 3. And Abigail, you want to explain what that is? Because I'm hazy. Okay, it's the 3%ers, and only 3% supposedly of the colonists actually revolted against England. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but they believe in everybody should have a gun. They're very they're very military, and they're huge. Paramilitary, huge in Canada, but they're just not. And they drive through my neighborhood. Everybody.
Yeah.
Look, my neighborhood's a nice neighborhood. Look.
I also read that they did pull out of after one of the protests they went to that became over race. They decided they didn't want to be associated with racism, so they did attempt to pull back at a point, but I don't know. Yeah, the 3%ers, but I don't know how long ago that was.
That's interesting. Well, it's also interesting. Oh, go ahead, Rosemary.
My last comment. What if, after we do white fragility among the whites, what if we found some way to do some Zoom things with Black people? and not to take white fragility, because some people some blacks don't like white fragility. They think it says that we're trying to solve their problems, and they can, but anyway, what if? I mean, I'm trying to think what's the if that we could do, because I think what we've done is incredible. We've grown, we're aware. So now it's the relation, and we've built relationships among each other. So how now to broaden that? Because how are we going to do it here? I don't know. I think we saw 3 blacks the other day, but do you go up to them, stop them, and say, there was one guy over at, he's really, really good. He was from he's one of the guys that was a wrestler or something that was here at NIC.
At NIC.
And he started working over at Verizon. And we'd say to him, please, bring more. But it hasn't, I don't think, happened. So I guess,
Rosemary, I think that sounds like a great, I don't even, or do we get black people? Do we get Native people? I did know that I went to Ross the other day at like 2:00 on Saturday. It was actually a multicultural experience.
Hmm.
I might have been a minority.
That is cool.
No, I wasn't a minority, no. But I think these are great. I think writing to Robin, because I just have a thing or two to tell her. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
But I think other things. And you know what, as we kind of close in, I don't know if this met your expectations, but my heart is full, you guys. I am so grateful. I don't know why this was big to me, but it's huge. I would love for you to go ahead and say which of the 5 groups of white fragility when do you attend our white fragility Zoom discussion groups? And we're going to start with Claire Marie. Oh, you got to unmute yourselves though. Claire Marie, when do you attend?
Oh, hang on, I'm unmuting.
When
do I attend? Wednesday at 11.
Awesome. Abigail.
Tuesday evening.
Gary.
He's muted.
He's muted, and he's not even saying anything.
Oh.
Thursday afternoon.
Thursday afternoon. Charlie.
Thursday afternoon.
Fabulous. Elaine. I can't unmute. There you go. Oh, I just muted you again. Do it again. Sorry.
Wednesday.
What about David?
Same.
Okay. Yeah. Carol.
Tuesday evening.
Margie.
Wednesday at 11.
Matt.
I did the first 3 on Tuesday, and I had a conflict last Tuesday, and I'm going to have a conflict tomorrow. So last Tuesday and tomorrow, I'm going to do Thursday.
There you
and
go.
I'm going to make my mind up about the last one.
Oh, he's surfing.
So you guys got to. Where there's a competition going on.
Oh. So are we winning you, or are we like brushing you off? That's like the competition.
You are embracing me, and I am embracing you.
Nice.
That's awesome. Very good. Dave Jacobson.
Thursday afternoon.
Very good. Mark.
Tuesday evening.
Sherry.
Wednesday, 11.
Adela.
Oh.
Thursday.
Oh, Adela.
Oh, I'm muted.
No.
Thursday afternoon.
Maybe
is that what we're doing it? I have so many Zoom things now.
I'm sure you do. Sounds good. Gil, how about you?
Monday morning.
Which time?
At 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. Gail Hannanen.
I'm open. I would say more evening than during the day.
Okay, there you go. So Tuesday, 6:30. Harry.
I was just going to vie for Matt. I said, Matt on Monday at 10:30. That's the best.
Okay. All right.
Patsy.
You got to try us.
Monday at 10:30, except when you allow me to come at 11 on Wednesday.
There you go.
Yeah, very good on Wednesday.
Kathy.
Monday, 10:30.
Bill.
Monday, 10:30.
Marilyn.
9 o'clock on Monday morning is fine.
Katie.
Oh, she's muted.
Nope, she unmuted herself.
Thursday afternoon.
Thursday afternoon. Rosemary.
Wednesday at 11.
Roberta.
Wednesday at 11.
Oh my gosh. You guys totally fill my heart. I hope that you have, in this time together, though not everyone has spoken, that you have been able to feel the spirit of the people, and that that there is a true desire to be a community and a world where we enjoy one another as much as I have enjoyed this, and to embrace people for who they are as God created them. And so you all are blessings, and I just love you all. And I say that with absolute truth. Although Rosemary has her moment. No, I'm just kidding.
And you wonder why my self-concept is in trouble. Hey, Heather.
Yeah.
I just, on behalf of probably everybody they could add in, this has been such a gift. And it's been a gift in 1,000 ways. Certainly the white fragility thing and the growth, but also the other community people that we've met. Not that we're sick of Catholics, but we kind of are. And so we love all of your people, the ex-Catholics and then the regular people. And it's just been...
it has been very rich.
It's just been extremely rich.
Yeah.
And your coordination, your leadership, your willingness to do 5 groups. Oh my God. So I just want to, even though I can't speak very much, I just wanted to say this. We are really grateful. And thank you.
Well, I'm grateful to you, and we do have a bunch, and we don't know necessarily where we're from, but I'm not gonna spoil that moment. I'm just gonna put that in my little heart place and just say thank you. And this will be available for who knows who's gonna watch it. I know that Patty Beyer will for sure, but thank you for sharing your stories, and maybe this will spawn off into some fun conversations in the rest of your group. So go in peace. God bless everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
I'll wait
Bye.
until you're all gone. If you have comments for me or whatever, I'm going to stick around until everybody's gone. So feel free.
We're gone.
Thank you very, very much, Heather.
Yes, it was a joy.
Thank you.
There you go.
All right.
You know, Heather,
Uh-huh.
Tony Stewart, who taught at NIC, do you know who he is?
Mark, do I know who that is? I think I do.
He was very active with the Aryan nations, and so was Norm Gissel.
Like active in an anti or a pro?
Oh, in getting them out of here.
Oh, okay.
And so they would be interesting to have on sometime. Excuse me, we
Why
could.
not? I mean, shoot, there's no, I mean,
Yeah.
it might be kind of fun. In this time of Zoom, it would really be, there's no easier time to get a group together almost, because you don't even have to shower. Let's be honest.
That's right.
So, yeah. Although I did. Okay, anyway, blah, blah, blah. That's good. Tony Stewart.
Hey, Heather, I just want to say thank you. This was brilliant. This was really so insightful. This was great.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I have to say, once again, it was all about me. I just wanted to hear it all, and I could
Well,
just listen to
and
it.
it is all about you.
Yes, it is. Sad. Don't tell my bishop. Okay. Gail, do you feel like you said everything that you needed to say?
Well, you know, I can always say more, but I think I've said enough for tonight. But I think it's really invaluable to get together and to be able to hear different points of view and share, because I think that's how we break down barriers.
It is, yeah. Yeah, who knows? And I know that Mark Habermeister had some, you've got your good Richard Butler story. You want to share that real quick with the 5 of us that are left?
Please.
Oh, did they quit? Mark, are you there? Oh, they quit. So I'll tell it. So they were in I thought he was actually going to tell it. He was in an interfaith group or whatever, and somebody was informing them about the Aryan nations and about what in the different leaders, and they'd actually talked about Richard Butler. Well, I guess Richard Butler was sitting in the audience, and he kind of stood up, and I mean, he didn't make a big deal out of it, but it was just one of those things, like, you know, when you're gossiping about someone and then you find out they can hear, you're like, ooh. And I guess that's really what it was like. So
sometimes it's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. But
sometimes it's yeah.
Yeah, it was fascinating. There's just so much, and I am disappointed that Jeanette Laster, who's the head of the Human Rights Institute, wasn't a part of this. But you know, she's scheduled. You know, so. But I think I'll send her the video just because I think it's good stuff. Good
Yeah,
stuff.
I love it. This is really, really, really good.
I'm pleased. Well, thank you for attending. That was a really big deal. I mean, I didn't know if anybody other than the panelists were going to show.
Yeah. You were wrong.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Heather.